A couple checked into my hotel at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. By the time I pulled the security footage the next morning, the timestamp showed them walking through our lobby doors twice, once at 11:47 and once again at 11:43, 4 minutes before they arrived. My name is Marcus. I worked the overnight audit shift at a mid-sized hotel off the interstate for almost 3 years. The job where you're alone behind the desk from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., running the night's paperwork, checking in the occasional late arrival, and mostly staring at an empty lobby until sunrise. Most nights, nothing happens. A trucker needing a room for 6 hours. A family whose flight got delayed. The job is boring by design, and I liked it that way. That changed the night a couple walked in a few minutes before midnight and asked for a room. They gave their name as Grace and Thomas Reese. Grace did the talking. Thomas stood a step behind her the entire time, hands in his coat pockets, not looking at me once. Not rude exactly, just somewhere else entirely, staring at a spot on the wall behind my head like he was waiting for something to happen there. I asked for ID. Grace handed me a driver's license, and I noticed her hand was ice cold when it brushed mine. Cold enough that I actually glanced up at her, though she didn't react at all. I ran the license. It came back valid. I gave them room 214, second floor, end of the hall. Grace thanked me. Thomas said nothing the entire transaction. I watched them walk to the elevator on the lobby camera. The way you half-watch anything at 1 a.m., out of habit more than interest. Grace stepped in first. Thomas paused just outside the elevator doors for 3 full seconds before following her in, long enough that I actually looked up from my paperwork, expecting him to say something to her, ask a question, anything. He didn't. He just stood there facing the closing doors, then stepped through the gap at the very last second, like he'd been waiting for permission from someone. The elevator doors closed. I went back to my paperwork and didn't think about it again for almost an hour. At 1:52 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. Room 214. I picked up. Nothing on the line at first, just faint static, then Grace's voice, very quiet, asking if anyone else had checked in tonight. I told her no, they were the only guests on that floor. She was quiet for a second, then said, "He says someone's in the hallway," and hung up before I could ask who he meant. I checked the hallway camera for the second floor. Empty. I checked it twice more over the next 10 minutes. Still empty. I told myself it was nothing, a tired guest hearing the ice machine cycle, and went back to my paperwork. 20 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same room. This time it was Thomas. First time I'd heard his voice all night. Low, flat, almost bored, like he was reading from a script he'd said 100 times before. He asked me without any preamble if the hotel had ever had an incident in room 214. I told him I didn't know of one, which was true. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "That's what the last person said too," and hung up. I sat at that desk for a long time after that call, staring at the phone, before I finally pulled up the guest history for that room out of simple unease. Room 214 had a normal booking history. Nothing flagged, no incident reports, nothing in the notes field beyond routine maintenance requests. Ordinary room. Ordinary guests, mostly. Except one thing caught my eye scrolling through the log. A booking 8 months earlier. Same room, same last name, Reese. Checked in on a Tuesday night, checked out early the next morning. No explanation given. I told myself it was a coincidence. Reese isn't an unusual last name. I didn't have a first name attached to that older booking to compare, since the system had only logged the last name and a room number back then, an old data entry quirk from before we upgraded software. I put it out of my mind and kept working. Around 3 a.m., hotel policy required a physical walkthrough of the halls. checking fire exits, making sure nothing looked wrong. Routine. I'd done it 1,000 times. I took the stairs up to the second floor instead of the elevator, out of habit. The hallway was exactly as it should be. Dim emergency lighting, all doors closed, quiet except the hum of the ice machine at the far end. As I passed room 214, I heard faintly through the door what sounded like two people talking in low voices. Not arguing, just talking, steady and quiet, the way people do late at night when they think no one else is awake. I kept walking. It wasn't my business what guests did in their rooms at 3 a.m. I made it 3 more doors down the hallway before I stopped. I'd heard Grace's voice clearly through the door. A second voice too, low, male, that I'd assumed was Thomas. Except I'd just watched, on the lobby monitor not 20 minutes earlier, Thomas standing at the vending machine on the first floor, alone, for almost 10 full minutes, far longer than it takes to buy a bag of chips. I stood in that hallway doing the math in my head, trying to make it add up. It didn't. If Thomas had been downstairs, whoever was talking with Grace in that room wasn't him. I want to be honest that I don't fully know why I did what I did next. Hotel policy is clear. You don't disturb guests without cause, and a strange feeling isn't cause. But I knocked anyway, quietly, telling myself I was doing a routine wellness check. Grace answered almost immediately, as though she'd been standing right by the door, alone. The room behind her looked completely normal. One bed slightly rumpled, a suitcase open on the luggage rack, nothing out of place. I asked if everything was all right. She said yes, perfectly calm, and thanked me for checking. I could see past her shoulder into the room. No one else was visible. The bathroom door stood open, light off, clearly empty. I apologized for the disturbance and left. I heard the deadbolt turn behind me the second the door closed. I went back downstairs and reviewed the vending machine footage again, more carefully this time. Thomas had indeed been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, but watching the footage closely, he wasn't actually doing anything the entire time. Not selecting anything, not checking his phone, not shifting his weight the way people naturally do standing still. He simply stood facing the machine, motionless, for the full 10 minutes, then turned and walked back toward the elevator at a completely normal pace, as though nothing unusual had happened at all. I rewound it twice more, watching for any moment his posture changed. There wasn't one. 10 full minutes of complete stillness. At 4:15 a.m., our system flagged something that made my stomach drop. A duplicate key card had been issued for room 214. I hadn't issued it. No one else was working the desk. According to the system log, the second key had been cut using our master terminal at 4:07 a.m., 8 minutes earlier, while I'd been sitting less than 6 feet from that terminal the entire time, doing paperwork, and had not touched it once. I stared at that log entry for a long time. There was no explanation in our system for how a key gets cut without someone physically standing at that terminal and initiating it. I went back upstairs immediately, taking the stairs 2 at a time this time, no longer pretending this was a routine check. Halfway up the stairwell, the emergency lighting flickered once, then steadied. In that half second of near darkness, I was certain enough that I stopped completely on the landing, that someone had been standing directly above me on the next flight of stairs, close enough that I should have heard footsteps, seen a shape, something. When the light steadied, the stairwell above me was empty. I stood there for almost a full minute before I made myself keep climbing. I reached the second floor and walked straight to room 214. This time, I didn't knock quietly. I knocked hard, 3 times, loud enough that I heard a door open somewhere else down the hall. Another guest, annoyed, glancing out before shutting their door again. No one answered room 214. I used my master key. Hotel policy allows entry if there's genuine cause for concern, and by that point, I had more than enough. The room was empty, suitcase still on the rack, bed still rumpled exactly as before, bathroom light still off. No Grace, no Thomas, no sign either of them had left through the hallway, according to every camera I'd already checked twice that night. The room wasn't entirely undisturbed. On the nightstand, a hotel notepad sat with something written on it that hadn't been there during my first visit. A single line, in handwriting too neat and deliberate to be a hurried guest note. He's always 4 minutes early. I photographed it before I fully understood why my hands were shaking as I did it. I checked the bathroom, the closet, under both beds, behind the curtains. Nothing. The window was sealed, hotel standard, impossible to open from the inside more than a few inches. I stood in that room alone for a long time, notepad still in hand, before I finally called my manager. My manager, Denise, had worked at that hotel for almost 15 years, longer than anyone else on staff. She came in at 5 a.m. when I called, and she didn't seem nearly as surprised as I expected her to be. She told me carefully that room 214 had a history the official records didn't fully capture. A history from before the property changed ownership and the reservation system was replaced, wiping most of the older notes. She said longtime staff still talked about it sometimes, quietly, the way people do about something they don't fully believe, but won't quite dismiss either. A couple, decades earlier, had stayed in that room under circumstances no one on staff now could fully explain. Not a tragedy exactly, nothing anyone could point to directly, just an early checkout, a strange final night, and stories that persisted long after every person who witnessed it originally had moved on or retired. She said the room got rebooked under the name Reese more often than any other name in the system, always for one night, always checking out before dawn, and that the front desk staff simply stopped questioning it years before I was ever hired. It was Denise who suggested pulling the exterior lobby camera footage from earlier that night, the one covering the main entrance, to see exactly when the couple had actually arrived. That's when we found it. The timestamp showed Grace and Thomas Reese walking through our lobby doors at 11:47 p.m., exactly matching my memory and my check-in log. The same camera also showed them walking through those same doors at 11:43 p.m., 4 minutes earlier, same clothing, same measured pace, walking to the exact same spot at the front desk where I had checked them in 4 minutes later, except at 11:43, I wasn't at the desk yet. My shift didn't officially start until 11:45. There was no one at the front desk in that earlier footage at all. Grace and Thomas simply stood there for 4 full minutes, facing an empty desk, waiting. Denise and I sat with that footage for a long time without speaking. Eventually, she said what I'd already started to suspect myself, that whatever checked into room 214 that night, whatever answered when Grace called down about someone in the hallway, whatever stood motionless at the vending machine for 10 unmoving minutes, wasn't arriving late or early relative to us at all. It was arriving on its own schedule, one that had nothing to do with when guests actually walked through our doors, 4 minutes ahead of whatever it was pretending to be. The note left on that nightstand, "He's always 4 minutes early," wasn't a stranger's threat. Reading it now, knowing what we knew, it read like something Grace herself had written. A warning she'd left behind for whoever found that room next, about the version of Thomas that arrived before the real one did. I put in my notice 2 weeks after that night. I told Denise it was for a daytime job, which was true, though not the whole truth. Room 214 is still in service. As far as I know, it still gets booked under the name Reese more than any other name on file. Always one night, always an early checkout, and none of the staff who've worked there since have ever been told why. The same way I never was, until that night forced the question. I still don't know who or what checked into that room 4 minutes before the real Grace and Thomas Reese ever walked through our doors. I know it left a note. I know it made a phone call in a voice indistinguishable from a man standing motionless at a vending machine downstairs at the exact same moment. I've never gone back to that hotel, not even to pick up my last paycheck in person. Some nights, working somewhere else entirely, somewhere with actual daylight and actual coworkers, I still check the clock 4 minutes before I expect anything to happen, just to be sure I'm not already too late.